Hello! Welcome to The Whovian's Perspective, a series where I, CM5, a massive fan of Doctor Who, review Star Trek. I know almost nothing about Star Trek, only what's leaked into the cultural zeitgeist. But being a fan of the other massive sci-fi television series, I've been curious for a long time to see what it's all about. My only ever experience with the show was at around 10 years old, a Thanksgiving dinner at a family friend's house where The Next Generation was playing on the TV, and I completely ignored it. I wouldn't find a love for sci-fi until a year or so later when I started watching the revived era of Doctor Who. And that franchise is so vast, I'd been too busy catching up on it to even think about Star Trek until recently. Spurred by pure curiosity of what this franchise had to offer, I purchased the original series on Blu-ray and promptly got a refund because one of the discs had a massive crack that rendered it inoperable. Using the refund money to buy it again because they wouldn't let me just get a replacement copy for some reason, I decided, hey, wouldn't it be interesting to review the show from my perspective? When the replacement disc finally arrived, I decided to do exactly that. Notebook in hand, I popped in the first disc and started watching the third episode by accident, getting super confused. But after the title sequence made me realize my mistake, I started watching the actual first episode. I'm not going to bury the lead. I thought this episode was good, but not particularly exceptional. It opens with an incredibly simple yet very effective voiceover from Captain Kirk, portrayed by the late and great William Shatner, who is still alive. I was lying. He's being beamed down with his boyfriend Bones to perform a routine medical examination on the latter's ex and her husband. This took me incredibly off guard. You see, I was expecting the vibe of classic Who from this, which had little to no interest in anything romantic. John Nathan Turner, a producer for the classic run's later years, even saying that there was to be no hanky-panky in the TARDIS. But, of course, the revived era of the show
We've had 2 days crammed into the space of one.
blatantly disregarded this. But for a show in the late 60s, I did not see this coming at all. The episode sets up a pretty standard sci-fi mystery with everyone seeing a different woman. Bones seeing a young version of his ex, Kirk seeing an older version, and crewman Darnell seeing a woman from his past. Does this imply that Kirk is into grannies? As the medical routine goes on, there are fun little hints of something going on, and oh my god, Darnell is dead! Not Darnell! Bones and Kirk return to the ship to perform an autopsy. We get a pretty great scene establishing Uhura and Spock.
Somebody is dead, and you just sit there. It could be Captain Kirk. He's the closest thing you have to a friend.
Lieutenant, my demonstration of concern will not change what has happened. The transporter room is very well manned, and they will call me if they need my assistance.
They perform the autopsy, and nothing seems to be wrong.
What would you say was the cause of death?
The head trauma?
No.
Asphyxiation?
No.
The collapse of the chest cavity?
No.
All right. What was the cause of death?
There wasn't one.
It's a fun little mystery, and everything ends up making sense and is paid off in a satisfying way. The internal logic presented is incredibly solid. It turns out that Darnell died of salt deprivation, something that was set up earlier and makes sense that they wouldn't check for. Later in the episode, when Spock gets attacked, he survives with minimal injuries because, well, he's an alien whose body doesn't rely on salt to survive. The alien's ability to appear as different people, well, unclear in what the rules around it are, never gets outlandish to the point where you couldn't easily come up with an explanation. This is very different from Doctor Who, which leans much further into science fantasy. That show is perfectly fine having you go, yeah, okay, I guess it can do that, if that makes the episode more entertaining or makes the plot move along. This isn't a quality I dislike, though it very much can hinder the storytelling at some times, but I like this as well. It's a different flavor of sci-fi. There is one thing about the episode that doesn't make sense to me, and it's, what is this alien's game plan? It's a creature that relies on salt to live. Okay, its planet's reserves of salt have dried out. So far, so good. It absorbs the salt from people to feed itself, killing them in the process. Sure? I understand the first killing, it being so starved that it resorts to killing a man for nutrition, but why not just be upfront? Order salt supplements like you were planning on doing anyways. I really don't see why it has to infiltrate the crew, slowly picking them off for salt. If it can take the form of a regular person as well, couldn't it just move somewhere with plenty of salt and nobody would bat an eye? It's implied that it also feeds off psychic energy, but it seems perfectly fine with just passively absorbing it from one person. This feeds into my issue with the moral dilemma. This creature is the last of its species, and it's repeatedly pondered if whether or not its actions are justified by its right to live. But this doesn't really work because it's killing people for no apparent reason, and the crew members don't seem particularly invested in this idea, besides a remark Kirk makes at the end.
Something wrong, Captain?
I was thinking about the buffalo, Mr. Spock.
At a surface level, it's a genuinely quite interesting thought experiment, but within the context of the episode, it falls pretty flat. I really hope that at some point in the 50 seasons of Star Trek, Jesus, really? I really hope that at some point in the 50 seasons of Star Trek, they explore this idea in a more effective way. Now, I realize that having bitched about the episode for the last little bit and my open admittance of not finding it particularly amazing, it might seem like I didn't have a fun time with it or that I'm being harsh. I really want to emphasize that I did enjoy this, and it only heightened my excitement to delve into this franchise. It just had a couple of shortcomings is all. One thing I absolutely adored was the production design. The costumes for the crew members are so incredibly simple yet so effective. The sets are ambitious and a joy to look at, and the prosthetics are immersive, and the colors are vibrant and fun. Look, I've always loved old special effects, especially the lower budget TV ones. One thing I look forward in a classic Who serial are the cheesy visual effects. They look goofy as hell, and I love reverse engineering how they did them as I watch. Campy effects, to me, aren't immersion breaking. They're a reminder of all of the people who worked on this piece of art, all of the people who poured their heart into bringing it to fruition. They only ever imbue me with a deeper appreciation for what I'm watching. Because of this, when I found out that the Blu-ray I had purchased contained enhanced digivisual CGI computer VFX effects, I cried. For 7 hours and 12 minutes. I feared that this otherwise incredibly cost-effective, high-quality Blu-ray set with boatloads of special features and, well, subpar packaging, had George Lucased the show. Luckily, the enhanced VFX were fully optional, the original version being on the disc alongside the new, much like some of the classic Doctor Who Blu-ray collections. Due to my love of old effects, and for authenticity's sakes, these will be the versions I'm watching and using for footage. My point is, at the end of the day, this episode features 2 absolutely hilarious effects shots. That creature looks amazing. The amount of care that went into this costume that was only going to be on screen for about a minute is extremely commendable, and I adore it. But that crossfade into it had me laughing way harder than it had any right to. It's great. It's exactly what I wanted from a 60s sci-fi show. Also, look at this awesome fight scene.
Stop it!
There are a couple other things I do want to note. The inclusion of this biolab with all the plants seems a little weird. I get that they want to introduce this character as a botanist, but I feel like they didn't have to draw this much attention to it. It makes it seem like the plants are going to be important later, but they're not really. For some reason, Truth Serum was brought in, and it kind of feels like a wild thing to drop and not do much with. When the creature turns into this guy to try and seduce Yuhara.
Whoa! Is that blackface, dude?
It keeps making these really funny faces during this intimate moment, and it's great. There was also a lot less hanky-panky than I expected, though I did put in my notes, will Bones and Kirk kiss in the autopsy room? Other absolute bangers from my notebook include Plum.
Plum.
Kirk funny run, Spock lame run. And amusing on my favorite line.
The creature. It kills.
This is a fun episode, a very entertaining bit of science fiction. While I definitely think it's far from perfect, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't intriguing and that it didn't get me incredibly excited to see what kinds of adventures these characters will go on. I'd recommend this. It's pretty good. Until next time, I'm CM5, and this has been the Whovians Perspective. 2 out of 10 needed more epic lightsaber duels. Hey, if you like this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon so I can keep making them. It would be a real help. You'll get new episodes early and get to see some of the process behind making them. Thanks for watching, bye!